I do apologise that I do have this terrible throat. I'm actually at the tail end of it. Then I'm getting on a plane and going to give it to everybody else in Europe. It's just dreadful. I wanted to talk about smoking in this particular setting because it's currently my area of interest. One of my areas of interest is to look at how we can best improve smoking and managing smoking. That's the language we're now using. It was recently plagiarised. Is that an insult, or is that, how do you feel about being plagiarised without being acknowledged? Using the wording like this, the word managing smoking, rather than intimidating smokers and saying you've got to quit. The word quit is really gone, because people, if they could have, they would have. This is a country where prevalence of smoking is really very low in some groups, as I'm sure you all know. Socioeconomically, the upper echelon don't smoke, it's anathema, but still it's the now and behaviour of a whole group of people that we all interact with. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can better manage this group. I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't think this is terribly rude, but I'm going to assume you don't know a lot about nicotine. Is that right? Most people think they know things about smoking, but they don't. And you just tell me if you knew this already, we'll sort of move on real fast. And the reason why I'm talking about this and understanding more about nicotine and nicotine dependence is because simply it helps our clientele. Do you have clients or patients? Clients. So if you have clients, it helps your clients. If you know more about this, it helps them. Right? The more you know, the better they do. We all agree? We all know that. So if we know more about smoking and we know about nicotine addiction and how it works in the body and the brain, then we can help our smokers and inform them of the implications of all of it. It's not just that smoking is bad for your health, but why on earth are you doing it? And why are you doing these things together? So I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. The fact that we do know in Australia today, doesn't matter who you survey, most smokers want to quit. Anybody here in the room not know how much a packet of cigarettes is? A legal packet. How much is a legal packet of cigarettes? Hands up. Who knows? $40. Did you know that? Up to $50. In some remote areas in this state, it can be $80 for a packet of 25. So, but the average, if you swan into Woolies today, now, it's about $40 to $45. Winfield Blue is the most popular brand here, I believe, right? It's about $43 for a legal packet of cigarettes. That's your pension in 1 week, right? So I want you to remember one of the biggest motives today to not smoke isn't necessarily your health, because our smokers smoke underwater, right? They'll smoke no matter what's going on medically. It's financially incredibly burdensome. In fact, we now believe that smoking really contributes to poverty in our clientele. So if you know how much it is, that's incredibly important. Roll-your-owns are equally very expensive. They make them thinner. That doesn't make them any healthier for you, but they make them thinner. Does anybody know what an illegal packet of cigarettes costs? And how do you know they're illegal? $3 or something? Oh, no, that's very cheap. That's more like other countries where it's legal to sell it for $3. About $8.
Bring it in the south.
Yes, falling off the back of a boat. That's how they get here. Package looking like our cigarettes, with health warnings on them, with so-called plain packaging on them, but they cost about $8. That's how you know a packet of cigarettes is illegal. There's no other way of knowing. The packaging is exactly the same. I'm just pointing that out, and that's what our smokers do. Our particular health, the health consequences aren't really of interest to them anymore. What we do know about our smokers today is what's holding our smokers back is they're very dependent on nicotine. This is a very dependence-producing substance. I hope everybody appreciates this. They unfortunately have what is called the stress paradox. I live a stressful life. My life, this is what's going on, and I smoke to self-medicate distress and upsettedness and anxiety, and life is shit, and that's why I smoke. right? Not knowing that nicotine's a very short-acting drug, it wears off, which exacerbates the distress, exacerbates the anxiety, exacerbates depression. Just in case you didn't know, nicotine is one of the most formidably powerful antidepressants on the market. Antidepressants on the market. You smoke a cigarette, how long does it take to make you feel better? 30 seconds is a long time, right? It's not going to be 20 minutes. This isn't 2 weeks later you're taking an antidepressant and it's making you feel better. This is about 30 seconds is a long time. So it's very, very quick. It acts as an anxiolytic. These are incredibly fast acting. Remember, this is arterial, if you've forgotten that, right? When you inhale a drug, any drug, it goes straight through to the arterial system, bypassing the venous system, right? Do you remember this? So it's going through the alveolar wall, straight into your bloodstream, straight to the brain. This is milliseconds. So very powerful, very formidable. So they suffer, unfortunately, what we call the stress paradox. They have these conflicting drivers. This is not very common in with other substance use and abuse. I'm sure you know that. Not understanding, and the kids in particular don't know the difference between. I love smoking, therefore I'm not addicted to it. You've all heard that sort of language. With smoking, it's in particular, not understanding and not being able to define for themselves the need to do it. The fear of failure doesn't always come up in this clientele, but it certainly does with patients with respiratory or cardiovascular consequences of smoking, which a lot of people have, and smoke anyway. In case you thought, if you've got COPD or emphysema or whatever, cardiovascular, you just had infarcts. 60% of people with infarcts relapse on the way home from hospital. 60%. So having a cardiovascular effect or event doesn't necessarily preclude you from doing it. So is there a fear of failure? There's distinctly that. The other substance use and misuse, unfortunately, is profoundly combined. We do have this, what I call these comorbidities. In fact, they've stopped calling them comorbidities, they've started to call them multimorbidities. Right? There's not just one thing going on, there's a whole multitude of things going on with our substance users. Does it enhance the use? Some of you may not know this. I'll quickly tell you, when you smoke a cigarette, nicotine acts like a cough suppressant. Did you know that? A cough suppressant. Put papers on everything I'm telling you about. Is what you should do, and they don't. You should cough every time you inhale from a cigarette. Every inhalation, right? If you inhale smoke from anything at all, you should cough. 25 cigarettes a day, 25 times per cigarette. How come you don't cough every single cigarette you puff on? And you don't, because nicotine's a cough suppressant right on the line, if you remember this, at the carina where the lungs bifurcate. So, which is why our cannabis users, I'm sure you all know that, mull it with tobacco, because you can inhale deeper and not cough, right? You won't cough out. You do this, hold your breath, and you won't cough because of it. So coughing is a funny sort of side effect, but it's an interesting combination of drugs. Does nicotine enhance the efficacy of other drugs like caffeine and alcohol? It does, so synergistic effects in the brain, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. So we do have these synergistic effects. What holds you back, and this is a considerable dilemma we have with our smokers, is that they live with smokers. Other people smoke around them. This is not a minor matter. This is like passive alcohol. If you're alcohol dependent, or you have had a history of alcohol addiction or alcohol dependence or alcoholism, depending on how you want to call it, right? And you get a little bit of alcohol in your bloodstream, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's not a good thing, right? You don't want a little bit of this drug, a little bit. What if you're living with a smoker and you're getting a little bit of this drug all the time and you're trying to not do it? Does it stimulate you to smoke? These are chemical stimuli. This isn't a visual thing. I see my brother smoking and I feel like a cigarette. This is me inhaling the drug passively. So passive smoking for smokers who are trying to quit or who are even trying to abstain for some length of time is actually quite a formidable, it's called proximal smoking. it's got another point to it. It's not just it's bad for my health, but it's actually stimulating the smoke. And that is an aspect we perhaps don't know much about. Well, we know much about it, but you may not know. It's a risk factor for not quitting smoking. And here's another risk factor, which is a very interesting one, and that's nagging. And there are good papers on this too. Don't nag your patients. Did you know that? Don't nag your clients about roadside smoking, because they go away and they smoke more. Right? It's not as if they haven't heard this before. They've all been there and done that. So I'm just telling you why it actually can be counterproductive. It's not to say that people shop GPs for this, but they're sort of sick of it, and the GP knows that they're sick of it, so they sort of stop doing it. Nagging is not a good thing. Family members nagging is really seriously counterproductive. I hope you can see this, or maybe not. This is just a schematic. I actually had a citation here. This is Neil Benowitz from UCLA's work. Just a way to schematically talk about smoking. What happens to people when they smoke? I want to remind you that initiating into smoking in this country, the average age of having your very first ever cigarette is 9 now. That doesn't mean you're buying them every day once you're 9, but exposure to the very first cigarette, if it's not there, that's not a small matter either. Fetal exposure, we were just talking about this earlier, has a huge impact on the development of that child into its adolescence and adulthood. The mental health development of that child. I just want to tell you that's a whole lecture on its own. What happens to the fetus if it's born well and it's born on the right size? What happens to its mental health is significant. But exposure, if a child takes up smoking or uses a cigarette for whatever reason at 9, there are a whole lot of influences around that. One of the things I'm going to tell you about is nicotine and what happens to it in your body. I'm not sure if you all know this. Tell me if you knew this. How you metabolize nicotine matters. Did you all know that? How you metabolize alcohol matters, doesn't it? Yes? Right. What's the enzyme that metabolizes alcohol? Alcohol. Huh?
Dehydrogenase.
Alcohol dehydrogenase. Did you know that there's an enzyme that metabolizes nicotine? Same idea. Who's got low alcohol dehydrogenase in the room? Anybody know if they have? How do I know I have? Pardon? Flushes when I drink. Cheap drunk, right? I don't do alcohol very well. Anybody else in the room doesn't do alcohol very well. It's common in women. We don't have a lot. And there are whole groups who don't have a lot. Who are the biggest group? Asians, right? Caucasians have a lot more. Asians have less. The Koreans have the least amount of alcohol dehydrogenase on the planet. Did you know that? As a group, as a racial group. So that matters. So what does it mean? It doesn't mean they don't get drunk, but it doesn't take much to do it. That's the trick here. Does this happen with smoking? Well, now you know it does, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. What does it mean? If you're a fast excreter of nicotine, what do you have to do? Smoke more. And who smokes? So don't go down like they've got dreadful lives and that's why they smoke. Think liver function, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that too. So it's how you metabolize nicotine, things that affect the brain, the reception. Why didn't you ever smoke? Anybody here in the room have a cigarette ever in their lives? Ever? Ever? Right? Keep your hand up if you went on smoking. Keep your hand up if you found it difficult to quit. So what you find is lots of people try it. It's just like alcohol. Lots of people try it. Some people become dependent on it. Some people aren't. And some people have real difficulty not using it. Why is what you want to ask. Why is it that some people get hooked on nicotine? And this has got to do with your receptors in the brain, and these are unfortunately an inherited trait. This is an inherited trait. You cannot pick your parents, right? You cannot. So heritability has a huge role to play in smoking. You didn't know that. I'm telling you all of this because this is what we now tell our patients. Just like they have learnt about alcohol and alcohol dependence and heritability there, we're talking to them about heritability. So how you release neurotransmitter substances from nicotine has a big role to play. Some do, some don't. Nicotine didn't do it for me. Lucky for me. That's all there is. and how that becomes a reinforcing behaviour. And once you're in that circuit, I'm going to talk about psychiatric disorders, substance abuse, age and gender. All these things have an impact on... Oh, does that mean I can move it on? Anyway, all these things have an impact on why people do what they do, why they smoke. So, again, I do apologise if you know this already. I just want to remind you, because again, our smokers don't know this. We like to teach you and you teach your smokers. This all helps. Because our users of substances usually like to know a bit about their substance, don't they? They often do. Did you know that it's not nicotine that's yellow? So in case you knew that, or you thought that, this is a myth. I'm going to debunk some myths. Most of the nicotine is blown out into the air. So, does anybody remember, this is why I've got this, smokers never get plasma. Oops, oh I see, I am doing this. Sorry. Most smokers don't know this. You know this. If you smoke again, let's see, a Winfield Blue, 1.2 milligrams of nicotine. Does anybody remember what a milligram of nicotine can do for you? Milligrams. Anybody do any nursing in the room? Medical people in the room? Doctors in the room? Come on, what's a milligram of nicotine do for you? Kill you outright, dead. 1 milligram would kill you. So how come you don't get? Obviously, you smoke 1 cigarette, you should drop dead. You obviously don't. So what you do is you take a bit of it. 80% goes out in the air. You get 20% of that, and it's diluted by my lung volume, and then it's diluted by your blood volume. So the bigger the person is, height, age, and gender matter. Just that matters, because you're going to need to smoke more if you're a big bloke. A little lady like me, I've got a small lung volume, I'm not going to dilute it as much. I've got a smaller lung volume. Women don't smoke as many cigarettes, literally because they don't dilute it as much as men do. Just like that. So, if you know that, your blood levels of nicotine are in nanograms. A nanogram is a millionth of a milligram. So, myth number 1 is you get this amount of nicotine from a cigarette. That's not correct. That's wrong. So, if I'm telling you that, I'm quickly going to tell you about patches. A 21 milligram nicotine patch would probably kill everybody in this room, right? There's probably something a bit more than 21 people in the room here. Now, 1 would kill you. So once, what happens? Obviously you're not going to get that dose, right? Because you'd be dead every patch. So you put a nicotine patch on and it's going to dribble blood levels of nicotine in nanograms, not milligrams. Everything the smoker gets is in nanograms. So we'll come back to that. And that's why one of the biggest furphies there are nowadays is a smoker thinks, oh, I'm smoking a strong cigarette or a weak cigarette or whatever I'm doing. And they match it up with patches and go, oh no, that's too much. And they're wrong. Everybody is wrong on this. I'm not sure if you all knew this already, but I'm just quickly informing you so that our smokers have a better understanding. So we don't eat nicotine, we chew it, it's orally absorbed through the respiratory tract, but not in the gut. So you can't, and I edit a journal, we've never seen overdose of nicotine, drinking it, poison, wrong. You're not going to overdose of nicotine. It doesn't matter if you smoke 200 cigarettes at once, you will not die from nicotine overdose. I have never seen a reported case ever in my long, more than 30, about 35 now, year career. I've never seen a case of nicotine overdose. All right, we okay with that? I want to remind you of these things because this is where a lot of mythology gets perpetrated around. I want to remind you also that nicotine is a very short-acting drug. It's about 40 minutes, but again, it depends on how you metabolize it. If you're a fast excreter of nicotine, it might be quicker than that. Very quick half-life. We're all good on half-lives? Are we all good on how how heroin, what is heroin metabolized to? Who's in drug and alcohol in the room? Hands up. Who does drug and alcohol? What is a max? What does heroin metabolize to? I'm sorry.
More.
To?
Morphine.
Morphine. How long does that take? How long does it matter how long it takes? It does. These are the drivers, right? What drives a user is how long the drug stays in my body for. This is what's driving me. The agenda is whatever it is, the drug in the brain, but what's driving you is, well, if you know that nicotine has an incredibly short half-life of 40 minutes, roughly 40 minutes, something like that, and that's driving me to use it again. This is why there are 25 in a box, everybody. Your 18-hour waking day, think of your 18-hour waking day, divided up by the half-life of nicotine is 25 in a packet. Right? If you tell that to smokers, they go, I didn't know that. No, they don't know that. How would they know that? Now you know that, you tell them that. Because they don't like being manipulated, I'm sure you all know that. They don't even think about it. Most people don't think twice about it. But we do. We know our users of other drugs often use this drug, they don't do 25 heroines a day, do they? No, they wouldn't. Even if they could, they wouldn't. They don't need to. It's what's driving this is the need to do it. So the packaging, keep in mind, they're buying a dose every 40 minutes roughly. It's metabolized nicotine to cotinine, which is unlike heroin to morphine. Cotinine is of no real interest to the smoker, but morphine is, right, to the heroin user. But cotinine isn't. It's metabolized itself to 3-hydroxycotinine. Why am I telling you this? Because when you can find out how fast people metabolize nicotine by taking a urine sample. It's as simple as that, and you can look at the ratio between cotinine and 3-hydroxycotinine. Does it matter how fast they do it? Yes, it matters because people don't do well. I mentioned this before, and I did this very quickly earlier. This is a nicotine distribution curve. What's interesting about this, again, keep in mind, the results are, the answers to nicotine in your plasma are in nanograms per mil, not in milligrams. So if all of us in a room had the same cigarette to smoke right now, the same brand, we'd all get a different amount of nicotine from it, depending on how you smoke it. This is called the topography of your smoking. So you like X, you like Y, and whatever I give you to smoke, you're going to get that amount. Always get X, always get Y, no matter what I give you to smoke. A weak cigarette, a strong cigarette, you know, the so-called mild, we all know never to recommend a mild cigarette, don't we? Never recommend a weak one. We all know that. We're in fact not allowed to call them that anymore because of this, because people titrate. They'll smoke them differently. The topography changes. What I've got is here is look at this range. It ranges from, say, 10 nanograms per mil, but the average is about 40 in the room, to about 90 nanograms per mil. Who's up there, we now know, who has higher levels of nicotine in their blood, irrespective of what they smoke or how many a day they smoke. Who has higher levels, extracting high levels of nicotine, are psychiatric patients, drug and alcohol patients. Need more nicotine. Why? They've upregulated more receptors. Why they've done that, we don't know. Nothing to do with how you metabolize nicotine, but we certainly know they're getting more out of it. Why have I got this here? Is to show you one 21 milligram patch. This is the strongest one we can buy today on the market. The strongest one gives you exactly, no more because you can't extract any more out of a patch, 10 nanograms per mil. 10, which is what they say is effectively like peeing in the wind for a lot of our patients. So you can see straight away, which we know, most of our smokers are underdosed with NRT, aren't getting enough. So come to our clinics and you'll see people with 3 or 4 patches, new ones, every day at a time. Right? 3 or 4 going on at a time, using nicotine gums and lozenges and everything we can think of, because the nicotine replacement therapy isn't replacing. And that's why it's a bit of a furphy, what it's called. Grossly underdosed. So I wanted to remind you or inform you a little bit about that. As I talked to you about compensatory smoking, I believe you've got access to the slides later anyway. So if people, they want a certain amount of nicotine in their blood, in their brain, really, in their bloodstream, they'll inhale deeper, they'll hold their breath, they smoke more of the actual cigarette. This is all got to do with how you compensate. So when people go, I smoke 50 a day, and everybody goes, oh, 50 a day, that's a lot. 5 a day is better, isn't it? Well, you can get out of 5 what you got out of 50, right? You can go 50 like that and 5 and gobble the thing up. So unfortunately, we don't take a lot of store by, it's important to know how many a day you have, but it's more important how you smoke those per day, rather than getting fussed about the numbers and getting happier that they're smoking less. Smoking less isn't always the agenda, because unfortunately, when they compensate, they inhale deeper, up goes carbon monoxide levels. All our drug and alcohol units now, certainly in New South Wales, have carbon monoxide meters. We measure every patient every single time, not just on admission, but actually every day. Carbon monoxide, because it's a reflection of smoking anything, any organic material, produce carbon monoxide when you burn anything organic. Yes? So you've got carboxyhemoglobin, and carboxyhemoglobin causes clotting. I'm sure you all know that. But again, don't have time a lot to talk about the repercussions, but then particulate matter goes up when you're smoking, and compensating. We get more peripheral lung diseases, we get more peripheral carcinomas. That's why we very adamantly don't allow the word mild or light on our packaging, because we've seen since the advent of those words in the 1990s, we've seen lung cancers in the periphery of people's lungs. Peripheral cancers are much harder to treat, and certainly surgically to remove. When you write, it's all going to go to the periphery of the lung, the harder you draw back. And in case you think rolling your own is any better, that's a furphy, it's a myth. Again, if you're letting more air in through a roll your own, you're going to combust it more. Right? That's what carbon monoxide is, it's combustion. And when more air comes in, you're going to make more carbon monoxide. So don't let your smokers think this is a better for you, a healthier, whatever, alternative. They're wrong, and you need to disabuse them of that, because it's very significantly not better for you, it's worse for you. That's why I was talking about the limitations of cigarettes per day. I talked a little bit about that. I want to just remind you, now we ask, I'm sure you've heard this before, the time to first cigarette. When you wake up, how soon do you smoke? Does this help us? It helps us hugely in looking out at somebody is. Why first thing in the morning? Well, if you're a fast metabolizer, you've excreted the lot. Right? You wake up in the morning feeling nicotine-free, and it's in your urine as cocaine. So what's interesting for our smokers is I've got this really bad habit of smoking and having a cigarette, having a cigarette in the morning with a cup of coffee. Bad habit. And you're going, well, actually what's driving them is not just the caffeinated drinks as a stimulant, but nicotine depleted at that hour of the day. We've had smokers bitterly complain their cognitive abilities are really reduced when they don't have a cigarette first thing in the morning. It's like the oil for the motor, runs my motor. Are they right? They're absolutely right. I cannot express how much our smokers have neuroadapted, that's the term, neuroadaptation to nicotine. And if you think about it, which is just horrifying to think, that if my mum smoking in pregnancy, this bulb has neuroadapted to nicotine before it's had a chance to decide anything about anything. This is hardly an adult choice, decision that they're going to smoke. This is neuroadaptation to such a degree that unfortunately nicotine normalises their behaviour, normalises them when they can get access to nicotine as very young kids. I don't have time to talk, maybe next time, about what it does to the fetus. It's an issue that's really very important. It doesn't get a lot of press, smoking in pregnancy. Well, it does. Small baby, blah, blah, blah. But the neuronal effects doesn't get a lot of press at all. I talked about genetic susceptibility. Lots of genetic stuff being done on kids and adults who smoke. It tends to be very significantly a family trait. families of smokers, families of non-smokers. This has been really well clinched in twin studies where twins have been separated at birth. You all know the sort of cohorts that they can study in the United States by the hundreds of thousands of twins separated at birth. Animal models, there's good animal models of nicotine dependence being passed on to their progeny, which is really interesting. I just thought I'd tell you that it's highly heritable. You know what heritability is with alcohol dependence? It's about, what, 40% or so? It's considered highly heritable. Bowel cancer is a good one. Not a good one, I mean, it's terribly highly heritable, and it's considered really terrible because it's 10% heritable. Well, you know, smoking is about 60% heritable. It's a highly inherited trait. So what is the trait we're talking about? It's really to do with the brain responses to nicotine. You either have it a little bit or a lot. So here are the levels of nicotine addiction. We know our clientele are mostly in the severely dependent, wake up within minutes of smoking, yes. They may have tried, they may have medical consequences, they smoke anyway. That's a given. That defines, I'm sure you all know the DSM, and it defines a user. They do it in the face of what is evidently not in their best interest. This is not in my best interest to smoke because I've got COPD and it costs me $45 a pack. So it's not in my interest. And the severity of this, all of this runs in families. And they're certainly going to need more intensive treatment. We do know our so-called social smokers, our moderate smokers. Why do we have this range? We have it arranged for reasons we don't quite understand, why there are some people with far more neurotransmitter responses to nicotine than others in certain parts of the reward pathways of the brain. Do you want me to go into that? No, because I don't have time. But it ranges. I did say about, I've talked about this with, but I do want to let you know, and I talked about this earlier too with Robert, that there is also a high risk of schizophrenia in mums who smoke in pregnancy with a child, which is a very interesting, massive study that's come out from Scandinavia very recently. I want to tell you that when you speak to a smoker, ask them how old they were when they had their very first ever cigarette. Not just when you started buying them. Why? Because we know that there's neuroadaptation and it's harder to treat them. The younger you were, the harder it is to treat them. So there's a lot of implications of smoking in pregnancy and the whole perinatal period. This is something, as I said, is very dear to my heart to talk to you a little bit about liver function. I mentioned earlier straight away that smoking affects how you metabolize nicotine matters. This is the enzyme that does it, the CYP liver enzyme, if you know these systems. If you don't, there are about 2,000 enzymes in your liver and that you can sort of jig and stimulate. There were like 2A6 is the one that metabolizes nicotine, alcohol, dehydrogenase, does alcohol. It matters, this matters a lot what type you've got, you're born with this. If you excrete nicotine very quickly, you're going to need to smoke more, you're much more likely to be addicted to it, you're much more likely to develop lung cancer. This is all well and truly, I'm not sure if you've seen this text, Robert. It's a big, enormous 600-page thing, don't download it. This is from the National Cancer Institute on phenotypes and endophenotypes, the genetics of nicotine addiction. And I wanted to remind you, they don't do well on one form of NRT, which is a bummer, because people say, oh, look, patches don't work for me. I wore a patch and I smoked anymore as well. It just doesn't work. They're usually wrong. It probably had some impact. It's just not strong enough and they're excreting it a lot faster. I mentioned racial variations with alcohol. There are racial variations with nicotine excretion. So it does matter if it's a big bloke sitting in front of you and he happens to be Turkish. It matters. Why the Turks are famous for being fast metabolizers of nicotine, which is where we get that saying from, smokes like a Turk. You heard that saying? Anybody ever heard that? They got this from the First World War when I think they saw in Gallipoli literally Turkish people smoking a lot. Came back to Australia and said, smokes like a Turk. And actually the Turks have been studied as is the whole of the Mediterranean rim being studied. If you think about it, think about the people who you might see as clients, if they're around from the south of France, south of Spain, Greeks, Italians, south, the whole Mediterranean rim, think Turkish, Middle East. Do you know anybody who smokes from there and the clients you've got from there? They smoke like it's going out of style. And the women, if they smoke, because culturally not always acceptable, but if they do smoke, and especially coming to Australia, more liberated they do, they smoke like it's going out of style. So it's interesting what's going on. It's a liver enzyme you're born with, and you get rid of nicotine really quickly. And you're at higher risk, and they do have higher rates of cancers, which is interesting or dreadful to know. The Japanese, you can see that, are really poor excretes. It's got nothing to do with prevalence. So if you go to Japan today, 60% of Japanese men smoke. And the Japanese government owns the tobacco industry, which is another story. So they've obviously got a strong conflict of interest going on here, as many countries do, many do. But what's interesting about the Japanese governments and the health departments is they don't actually see a relationship all that strongly at all. I know, I was there. I'm going, what are you thinking? They said, no, there's no real relationship between smoking and lung cancer. Because what happens is a lot of Japanese men smoke, but they don't smoke a lot. They actually don't need to do a lot, which is sort of interesting, and it is dose related to how many, doesn't matter how many a day you smoke. So the next thing I think I need, maybe not to tell you that much about, because you know about this a little bit, you tell me. You all know what polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons are. This is another liver aspect of things, something that's going on. You know not to use them, you know not to eat it. It's the charcoal on your barbecue steak, the charcoal. You all know you're not supposed to eat a lot of it. Not carcinogenic, you're not supposed to have a lot of this. And nowadays you're not supposed to have any really at all. And all of that charcoal comes about by the fact that you're burning an organic material, anything organic that burns, produces carbon monoxide, so the oil in the motor, or a leaf, or a barbecue, whatever it is. But you also produce these PAHs, that's what they're called. And what they do, unfortunately, is when you inhale them, they're in gas phase, just like nicotine's in gas, carbon monoxide is in the gas, PAHs are in the gas, it circulates in your body, goes to your liver and does this stimulation. Or as any pharmacists in the room? Pharmacists should be in the room because this is their bread and butter. What you do is you do this induction. It stimulates the production of enzymes, and particular enzymes that are really relevant to all of us. I think you might have heard this before, is 1A1, 1A2, these liver enzyme types, the one family gene. Why does it matter? 1A2 is particularly important for us because it helps metabolize a whole lot of things, like caffeine. So, have you heard this before? Smokers drink an enormous amount of caffeinated drinks. Have you noticed, or have you ever asked? And should you ask from now on? You should ask from now on, every single smoker. And it's fairly typical. I'll just quickly give you an example. Have I got time? A quick case of a man who came to see me, doesn't smoke, he's fine, all good. He said, I'm wearing patches, I don't feel like a cigarette at all, I'm not interested at all. And his wife is there and he's going, but she said, oh, he can't sleep at night, those patches, they keep him awake. And I do this, as you will now do. How much coffee do you drink? And he said, oh no, the same as ever, the same as before. How much? 5 cappuccinos every day. Okay, anything else that contains caffeine? Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Red Bull. Do you do any of that? Oh yeah, but it's Diet Coke. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at caffeine. Typically it's looking at 2 litres of Diet Coke every day. Now you know that. You ask your smokers, they will tell you huge amounts of caffeinated drink. Why do we make this relevant to our drug and alcohol users? Ask them how much caffeinated drinks they drink. How much do they drink? Anybody ask? You do sometimes. And how much do you get back?
It's more about the withdrawal, actually. I'll say, you might need to change how much your caffeine intake. And I'll say, oh no, I don't need as much now.
Yes, you don't need as much.
Mm.
That's right. So what happens is this liver enzyme 1A2 metabolizes caffeine. So when you smoke, you're breaking down caffeine. For every cup of coffee I have, who smokes, might need 3 or 4 cups of coffee to my 1 for the same amount of caffeine in our bloodstream. She's buying lots of caffeinated drinks. I only need 1. Same caffeine levels. What happens when she stops smoking? She comes into the detox unit or wherever and she's not allowed to smoke anymore. What happens to the caffeine levels? Why has he got the jitters and can't sleep at night? The patches are keeping me awake. Wrong. The caffeine is keeping you awake. Most people don't put it together, fair enough. You can't expect them to, but you can put this together now. So we don't want you to stop coffee though, because what happens if you stop coffee? You get withdrawals from caffeine. 40% of people get caffeine withdrawals. 40% of drinkers of coffee, if you're a drinker of coffee, you might know, 40% get headaches. So we don't want them to stop coffee, don't just go chop coffee, but we do want you to tone it down. So this is the advice we always give to our smokers coming into a facility like whatever the facility is you're working in. To tone it down, to not stop it. You don't have to quit smoke, quit. We don't want you to do that. In fact, there's no advantage to do that. Just tone it down, but be aware the implications. And as you were saying, they simply sometimes spontaneously don't want as much. Now, the implications, I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but these 1A2s and the family of liver enzyme 1 does these things to antipsychotics. You all know about this. I'm hoping you all know. But smokers will need higher doses of many medications because they smoke. This is not a nicotine effect. Why does it matter today more than ever is because you cannot smoke in hospital. So imagine you're on clozapine. Well, this one, you know this about methadone. Have you heard about this with methadone? So this liver enzyme type metabolizes methadone. So if you're smoking and you're on methadone for whatever reason, or you're on clozapine, or you're on warfarin, who knows what warfarin does? Right, it's into your blood, it's an anticoagulant. And you're on that at home and everything's fine. And then you have to come into hospital to have your appendix removed. Right? Unrelated entirely to why you're taking these medications, what happens to the medications? They go up. How long does it take? 24 hours. You can have somebody with methadone overdose within 36 hours of being hospitalised who has had a stable methadone for years. So you've got to be aware what the implications are on caffeine, which is significant to our patients, but on their medications. If in doubt, look it up. I just want to say, be careful when your patients are hospitalised, because unfortunately we have to reduce the dose, titrate the dose down. We're now trying to teach every single doctor in Australia about this because we have had methadone overdose. We have had clozapine overdose. We have had warfarin overdose. What happens if you overdose on warfarin in the hospital and you're there to have your appendix out? Yeah, you'll bleed. And they're on warfarin for a DVT and they've had it for months and what's called their INRs are normal and suddenly they're not. Overnight. So we have to be very cognizant of the medications people are taking. The ones that are impressive for us are insulin. Smoking a cigarette raises your blood sugar, in case you didn't know that. This cigarette, just like it raises my blood pressure, right here, right now, it would raise my blood sugar. So if you're taking blood sugars from patients, that matters too when they've just had a cigarette. So what do we do about blood sugars? Well, we actually, in our clinics, in our drug and alcohol services, give our patients jelly beans. Robert, let's get a paper on this. He did. Jelly beans. We do give them jelly beans. I want to remind you, none of these are nicotine effects. There is a combination of nicotine and these PAHs that affect alcohol dehydrogenase, as we were talking about earlier. So when you smoke a cigarette, what happens to your blood alcohol level? It goes down. So again, for one glass of wine I have, if I was a smoker, I would need 3 or 4. Smokers drink 3 to 4 times more than non-smokers. And the pubs and clubs know it. Because that's why no matter what goes on, they want a place for you to smoke. The smokers drink more. For the same blood alcohol level, right, you're going to need to buy 3 or 4 more glasses of whatever it is. This almost goes with every other drug we're talking about, licits and illicits. As we did a project some time ago with the needle exchange program in Sydney, where once we told our smokers coming into the needle exchange, they had to think this through. If you don't smoke or you manage your smoking better, you could actually use less drug, which saves you money. Using less drug is always alcohol saves you money, and this is true. And we've had smokers say this to us. I was a famous elbow bender, and now I've stopped smoking. I can't drink as much. I can't hold my drink. Now, if you know that and I know that, and I'm going to cut to the chase of what we do in drug and alcohol services, we now, certainly prior to admission, I'm not sure what sort of services you come from. Everybody got a short-term detox unit? Who's in detox? Maybe working in detox units? Who's working with, working with outpatients or? Pardon?
Health promotion.
You're in health promotion. For example, if you smoke while you're wearing a patch, for example, it's going to change the manner in which you smoke. So we're now telling patients if that changes it, you're going to not compensate as much. So we're now encouraging people to do that. And managing smokers in, say, detox units, by telling them you can still smoke, it's going to lower the PAHs and it's going to change the drug you take. If you come in for detox from alcohol, for example, if you're being admitted or you're prior to admission, we're now telling people to put on a patch and smoke anyway. Actually smoke anyway. Would you please smoke as well? Not to quit, not to stop. Don't force yourself to not smoke, but smoke anyway. What happens when you do that? It's a lot less reinforcing. Right? When you smoke a cigarette using NRT, it's less reinforcing. And when you do that, it changes those PAH. You're not doing this anymore. You're not getting as many PAHs. You're not inducing as many enzymes. And what happens to those people is they don't drink as much. So we've gone to alcohol use and other substance use via smoking. Everybody okay with that? So if you always thought that smoking should be the last thing you give up, think about maybe it should be the first thing. Not necessarily even giving up. So we don't tell people to stop smoking. We tell them to manage it better. If you want to do less harm, wear a patch and smoke anyway. If you want to give, I'll just give you sort of a very brief kiss.
Can I just check, when you say smoking, are you talking about the tobacco or are you talking about the nicotine? Because some people vape.
Yes.
So I'm wondering specifically.
We would, some of your clients are, not many of our clients vape, but we're talking about, it changes the dynamics of how you vape and how you vape. There are PAHs in cigarette, in vape.
Yes.
Yes, there are.
So it's the nicotine.
Yes. We're trying to change the niche. This is not a nicotine issue, this is a PAH issue.
Right.
Yes. But it's an alcohol issue when it's
Combustible material.
Yes.
That issue. Okay.
I want to remind you about nicotine withdrawals. This is just the list. I've got 30 seconds left or something. I've got very little time left, unless there's a lot of questions. Can I keep going and say no questions, or you want questions?
I think we'll go for questions.
We could go for questions, but I just want to tell you about nicotine withdrawals because people confuse it with nicotine toxicity all the time. As I said earlier, we've never seen an overdose of nicotine. You can put patches all over your body and you will not die, right? You just don't get enough nicotine out of them. So just don't go down that line. And don't start thinking, oh, people on Champix or Varenicline. Remember, I have no conflicts of interest. People on Champix, they go all funny and they get anxious and they get depressed and they're suicidal. Well, hello, we've had this way before people ever saw Champix. We know people become depressed and anxious. And we get people who are taking Champix sometimes become well, certainly manifest nicotine withdrawals. Can you be nicotine withdrawals on Champix? Yes, you can. It's what's called a partial agonist, partial antagonist. So what would you do if you had nicotine withdrawals on Champix? You smoke, and you give them a patch. Exactly. So now, currently, the best treatment for smokers, if it was me or my mum, you're on both Champix and NRT together. Is the current best practice. So I just want to remind you not to get fussed, to remind you and look at what nicotine withdrawals are. This has got nothing to do with the medication. People confuse it all the time. This is extremely rare. Overdosing from nicotine is extremely rare. A little bit about managing smokers, and then I'll finish up. We talked about how you know a bit more. Once you start to know a little bit more about smokers, and there are flags for you. If they told you I used patches and they didn't work, tease out a bit more about that, find out more about it. These are flags for you. They're not getting enough. Or it might be a flag for you, I tried Champix and it didn't work at all. Historically, if that's correct, and they used it properly and it didn't work at all, it wasn't like the fairy dust it's supposed to be. It is supposed to be fantastic, and it is in 1 in 3 people, fantastic. Don't bother doing it again, because this is these particular medications work on certain aspects of it. They're not committed to quit. We don't even go down this. You've got to be 100% motivated to quit business. Most of our smokers are motivated to quit, and they're taking these things and they're buying this stuff. And why isn't it working? Don't blame the patient. Think they're not getting the right advice, not getting good, solid treatment. I don't believe we need to go to e-cigarettes at all, not at all. I think we can do very well without it. I have a particular political, philosophical, ethical reason where I won't recommend e-cigarettes. I think they're very dependent producing, so it's a consumer issue on top of everything else. And there's the safety issue. We still are not solidly convinced that they're safe anyway. So talking about managing smokers, I talked about no evidence to cut down, no evidence of side effects, Champix, symptoms of withdrawal. I think I've covered that. And combination treatments I was talking about earlier, best treatment today. Now, if you haven't ever heard of cytosine, cytosine is the original Champix. That's where it came from, a plant originally, and then it was, synthesized, became Renee, which has become Champix. We're going back to the plant, and if we're really lucky, we'll get nicotine in a tea bag. Nicotine treatment in a tea bag that you can take orally, and will be very cheap. And the point of this is the cheapness of it, because it's a plant, literally grows all around the world, and I'd love to see it in countries where there's no pharmacotherapies to help smokers quit at all. So just what we've learned about NRT, most of our clients, your clients, our patients are underdosed with NRT. That's the biggest problem we've got. There's no evidence to wean them off. I just wanted to just remind you, what we do is we apply patches just before you go to sleep at night. Has anybody heard this before? Patches take hours and hours to peak. We've published on this. They take about 6. All the drug companies who make them are aware. You put a patch on it. It's not like having a cigarette, is it? You don't go, it's better. They don't, right? They smoke a cigarette and they go, wow. So 6 hours later, they peak. So having known that, myself and straight away I thought, well, what's the point of putting a patch on in the morning? It's going to help me with the first cigarette of the day. What about if I put it on just before I go to sleep at night and it peaks in the morning? And that's going to have to change the time of the first cigarette, and it does. Does it impede or impact on their dreaming or their sleeping? Not at all. It's the opposite. Because if you put a patch on in the morning, it's going to peak when you go to bed. And that's when they tell you I've got these dreams or wakefulness, remembering caffeine and always asking about caffeine. But keep in mind that at night, if it peaks, you're going to have these vivid dreams. So to stop that, put it on at night. And when you're awake in the morning, that's when it's going to peak. And then even then, it's probably not going to be enough. You're going to need more, and we usually do another one on top of that or more. We just titrate according to symptoms of urges to smoke. that's basically, if you want me to finish, which I need to do because I have to catch a plane anyway. So using these patches and, and telling people to do that is a much, much softer approach. So we know that these are called gateways to quitting, how you can recommend to somebody to try out for a day. Not sure for those in public health have ever done this, you will know tobacco day, but you can recommend things like alternating. Our TGA approves of this, by the way. Have a gum and then a cigarette, in that order, not the other way, right? A gum first, so you feel like smoking, fine. Have a gum while you're getting out the cigarettes. Throw it away and then have a cigarette. That's going to give you a little bit of nicotine, and that's going to change the way you smoke with a cigarette. It's not going to be as reinforcing. You don't have to tell them that. You just tell them it reduces the harm, which is true. If you're going to smoke, fine, do this, gum, then cigarette. So all these little tricks of the trade really actually help us smokers because they become gateways. If you say, look, wear a patch and smoke anyway, that's fine. And if you do that, we know it's a gateway to quitting. You don't have to tell them that. I was going to talk about this, but I don't have time. So maybe next time I can.
Thank you.